and welcome to the Changes Ahead podcast.
Giving space to the often unheard questions,
Doubts,
hopes,
and challenges facing the church in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Kathy, and we invite you to join us as we imagine the changes ahead. Thinking about this conversation with Grace, one of the things that really stood out to me is her heart. When she said, I'm for the church, in response to the defensiveness that she encounters. And that really struck me. But also, there was quite a moment where she was quite vulnerable.
Yeah. And that was a moment where I really feel like I missed an opportunity. I missed an opportunity to sit with the vulnerability.
Yeah.
And my response, while it wasn't negative, it was too soon. And so this episode, we're going to do something a little different. And Kathy and I, we're going to have just a couple of minutes at the end of the episode to reflect on that particular moment together. So we invite you to stay tuned after Grace has finished talking. Grace, welcome to the Changes Ahead podcast. It's really cool to be able to have some time with you to hear about some of your experiences and some of your thoughts about how the church could change going ahead. So welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Stephen. It's awesome to be here.
And I just want to add my welcome to Grace. And before we hear more of your ideas and thoughts, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what has formed you?
So my name is Grace, and I am currently living in Auckland. I am Baptist Discipleship Flats activator. I'm from Hawke's Bay. So at the time that we're recording this, that's on my heart, just thinking of everybody there and the cleanup and the chaos. And so that's what I bring this morning. That's also a big part of who I am, from Hawke's Bay. Very passionate about justice, very passionate about doing life together as Christians deeply and intentionally.
So you mentioned Discipleship Flats activator. Can you tell us what that means or what's that about?
Yeah, so Baptist Discipleship Flats is an intentional community model that's associated with the Baptist movement. And it's really about doing life together intentionally, discipling each other and being really connected in with our neighborhoods. And so my role in that is to help set up flats for young adults to create these rhythms of prayer and connecting and having food together that just allow for this space to happen.
Wow. You mentioned doing life, I guess, deeply a bit more. I guess that's probably in contrast to something. So can you unpack that a little bit as far as your experience of church or discipleship in your life? Like what is this adding and how is it making it deeper for people?
I think one thing that I noticed in my experiences of different churches is that connection was largely based on programs. And I found that wasn't a structure that allowed really deep connection with the people that we're doing life with. It often allowed some form of connection to the people in our churches who we are most like, but not necessarily feeling like my faith community was a deep community.
Right.
And so I think living together, I found, and living next door to people, it just adds this level of closeness that you just can't get not doing that. And it's often messy and hard and you run into conflict and confrontation, but that's how you get close with people. And that's where that amazing depth comes from. So I'm so passionate about doing life together and doing the hard things, so that we have this fruit of depth as faith communities.
Yeah. And it's so much more than the standard question that often gets said in church as a greeting, how are you? And people respond, fine. And that's what you're saying. You can't get that depth if that's the level that we're interacting on in a church service. So, yeah, you really get to see each other and all of our beauty and, the ugly too.
Totally.
When you live with people. So, Grace, you are at the moment in the middle of studying and you're coming to the end of some of that and you're about to do your thesis. I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, so I'm doing a research paper, and I'm probably going to do it on feminist theology and just re-looking at the gender roles of women in the Bible and what it means to be a woman in the identity of God, and just, I guess, challenging the norms and the narratives that we've had in church and just going, is this biblical, or is this because people have taught us this over and over again? So, yeah, I'm really passionate about that. And I'm also really keen to look into gender pronouns of God. We often refer to God as a male and being him, but I just don't know that it's that straightforward. Holy Spirit is often referred to with feminine and gender neutral pronouns, but in the English version, that's been translated to male. So, yeah, I'm really interested to take a step back and really look at that.
Yeah. And why is it so important?
I think particularly as a female, I've always heard the statement, we are made in his image. And I go, does that mean that males are more alike to God than I am? And yeah, I think it's started as that journey of going, how much do I relate to God? And I think just learning throughout some of my biblical papers, looking at the pronouns and going, that actually gender neutral sometimes when we've been taught that it's always male. And yeah, so I am definitely a questioner. I'm a curious person. I always challenge the norms, not because I'm trying to be annoying, but just because my brain goes, but why?
Yeah.
And so I always wonder why we always use male pronouns when I've seen that it's not always male. And then that gets me questioning about the patriarchy and lots of stuff.
You haven't started yet. So my thought is, what do you hope for in this?
I think I want to know God more. I want to know who God is outside of who I've been told God is. And I've often been told I'm naive or that I'm just believing the things that I do about feminist theology because it's trendy. Or, yeah, I've been told why I believe what I believe. And I almost probably want to prove to myself that, no, I want to do this simply because I want to seek out the truth. And it's kind of just an expression of who I am as a person. Yeah.
Amazing.
It's like getting another lens that you get to see something that has been there all along. But if you don't have that lens, you just don't go looking for it. And so it's saying it's always been there. That's what I'm hearing from you, the truth that's always been there.
Yeah, totally. And I think growing up, I was, in a lot of conservative contexts, and I was often taught women don't preach or lead in any way. I was, told off for praying out loud because I was a woman. But in that time, I always had this prompting of the Holy Spirit being like, no, like I've called you to lead. I've called you to preach. And so I think I've always felt like, yes, women should preach. And my whole journey has just been learning from a theological sense and a biblical sense why that's true.
Yeah, it's just that knowing, isn't it? I kind of relate to you in that sense of when I was your age, just felt the same calling to ministry. And I remember, with my husband, we both felt the same calling to be youth workers. And I remember saying to the leadership, can you pay us both half-time each? Because I felt it just as strongly. And being a woman wasn't anything to do with it. It was just I felt the calling. And I remember back then it was like, no. It was like I was asking the weirdest of questions. And so that's what you're saying. We have the same calling that we're responding to. And so then to go on that theological journey to go, yes, here is some of the thinking behind why, giving us that confidence to back that strong calling that we feel. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, totally in agreement. And I think the thing is that there's not an if, it's more of a when of when you get criticism for being a woman leading. And so it's nice to be able to really back yourself and be like, no, look at this, this is why.
Yes.
And that's an experience that is unique to women in that sense, because as a male, I've never had to go, well, here's the reason I can lead. No one's ever questioned that. And so I imagine that has quite a significant impact. Well, it's additional mental load, right? That women carry that I don't have to carry. So
no, but I agree with you, because as I'm listening to you, Grace, it is a mental load. Like, I couldn't understand back then, same age as you, why I wasn't taken seriously. Just because I was a woman. I had the same passion and calling. And so it is a whole nother load of, we're not seen. We're different. And it took going to Kerry to study to get that confidence to go, to know here it is. Here is the thinking and backing us.
Yeah, and I think on top of what you're already doing, leading or doing whatever it is as a woman, there's also the doubt that you sort of like feel people doubting you, and then you kind of start to internalize that and doubt yourself. And so I feel like there's also this mental battle that goes on of like, should I be here? And it feels like it's a bigger deal if you mess up, as opposed to when I see males, get something wrong, it's like fine, but when a female does, it's a bigger deal. And so I think there's that whole thing of, just the mental battle, but also feeling like you're always having to fight for a platform, fight for space, fight for your peers to be heard and to be taken seriously, and not to be treated like you're sort of a kid, I think. Yeah.
Can you maybe share a little bit what does that do to your psyche as a younger woman, and you're carrying this extra mental load? What's that like?
It's heavy. It's draining, it's exhausting. I think it's this big tension of the thing that I feel called to so much, gives me so much life, but at the same time, I always die a little bit inside when I feel like I'm not taken seriously. And it just feels unfair, it just feels unfair when I look at my male peers who don't get the same resistance that I do, who can just, who it feels like there's a lot more room for and space for, and it's just tiring feeling like I always have to fight for space and fight for doing the same thing that men get to do a lot easier.
Can I ask you, Stephen, as you heard that, because I know where my heart went, when you hear that phrase, I die a little bit inside. How do you hear that?
I feel responsibility as a male who is leading. And I know that there will be resistance even to me asking questions about pronouns. I can probably count on one hand the amount of times that I've used a feminine pronoun for God in a public worship space, and the equal amount of times that has been pulled up and someone has had a problem with that. And so I guess I bear responsibility that I haven't actually done the teaching, I suppose, to the communities that I've been involved in, to say, no, hold on a second, let's just take a step back and go back to the text and interrogate it as you're talking about doing, Grace. And so I guess as I'm hearing that, I mean, the term you used of I die a little bit every time, that's heart-wrenching to hear. And so I have no appreciation or experience of what that actually feels like. So I guess it reminds me of my responsibility in this space to not just say I support, and to actually go out of my way to get out of the way as much as I can, but also to say, but that traditional way of looking at things isn't the only way of looking at things.
Yeah, and I think that it's awesome to do the teaching and all that on this, but it's also not all the senior pastor's responsibilities. But I think in that comes a stepping aside, because I think, my age group in our 20s, 30s, we sometimes we see things that maybe the older generation doesn't, and that's not necessarily bad on anyone. We've just had a different experience of what we've learned. And so I think it's part of it is just making space for us younger ones to go, hey, look, what's this? Can we challenge this? Can we look into this in our preaching schedule?
Are you suggesting that they make space for you to be able to speak? So that's part of the preaching roster. Is that the kind of space that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's wider than the preaching, but I think that the change doesn't necessarily come from senior pastor teaching on it. The change comes when they step aside and allow for young women to speak on it and challenge and go about making change in the way that they see fit.
We'll be right back.
So do you think women need to see women as role models?
Yeah. Often when I've preached or taught or spoke up the front, people have come to me and gone, hey, like, I haven't seen people who look like me speaking and preaching. And so, like, you doing that gives me the confidence that I could do that too. So I think it's paving the way for others to look and go, hey, I see myself in her. I can do that too. But right now, in our churches, it's largely males who are doing the preaching, males who are speaking, males who are pastors, males who are in, higher leadership positions in the wider Baptist movement, but also just in general in churches.
So you're touching on issues of power and power dynamics within church spaces, which are present in probably any institution or most institutions. I wonder if you would be able to talk a little bit about your story and some of your experience, your personal experience with those power dynamics in church spaces or other spaces.
Yeah, I think I've had a range of experiences with this, both inside and outside of church, from a young age as well. And so often what I've noticed is sometimes it feels like a parent-child dynamic where as a woman, I'm kind of like the child, and I always have to get permission from the male to do things, to have a voice, and to pretty much do what I feel God calling me to, but I have to go through a male to get there. I think over and over again between the age of 10 and 20, I was given this message explicitly that I was not allowed to public speak in a church setting to those who are older than me or to any males. And so people often saw the gift of public speaking in me, but kind of felt the need to try channel it and say, hey, you've got this amazing gift. How about you use that for a women's devotional group for younger girls? And they had the best intentions, but that's the message that I heard over and over. And then when I left that sort of conservative context, I expected to have a new freedom where I felt like, oh, I can finally lead and preach without being questioned. But I actually didn't find that. And I actually found like there wasn't necessarily this explicit message that was telling me you can't do this, but I just felt the hesitancy of other people. And I think I saw a clear division between my male peers who were really empowered and would be asked to do these different leadership opportunities and would find pastoral jobs quickly. compared to myself and my female peers who had a completely different experience, and again often had to do anything, had to get permission to do it, and just felt this feeling like we're not trusted or validated in what we believe and what we feel called to do.
Grace, just as I'm listening, one of the things that I'm thinking about is, we often think older people maybe don't get it the same, older generation. But what about the younger men of your age group? Are they thinking differently? Are they supporting change for women? What's your experience in that space?
I think there's a variation of people. And yeah, I know that people are just doing what they know and saying what they know. I've found that some younger males are kind of a bit more passive about it and don't have an issue with me preaching or leading, but don't necessarily want to disrupt or challenge anything when there's spaces and times where I'm not heard and I'm not empowered in what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I feel like I wish it wasn't just us young women who had to fight for ourselves. I wish other people even were just curious to know what our experience is and to ask questions. Those are the best conversations I've had. And yeah, I just remember my cousin, who's same age male, I just remember a conversation where he just asked me so many questions about what it's like to be a young female in church, and ask questions about why I am questioning gender pronouns of God. And I felt so heard and seen and validated in that moment. And yeah, I think I appreciate when my age group of males are curious, when they come at conversations approaching it as though I'm not a threat.
Shall we pick up on that word threat you've just used?
Mm.
Do you have thoughts about why men see women as a threat to them in leadership spaces?
Yeah, I think one, and this is not everyone, this is, certain groups see a difference in belief system as a threat. And so what they've always grown up with, and not necessarily, again, that they've grown up with women shouldn't do this, but just that they've grown up with men leading them the whole time in church. And so it's familiar, it's comfortable. And then when a woman gets up to lead, it's different and it's uncomfortable, and she has a different opinion, and what do we think about that? So I think it's a threat to our subconscious beliefs. And I think change is just hard for humanity in general. I think it's just hard for church to be different to us, which we so need it to change. We so need it to be different. And if we don't, we're going to lose a whole generation of people and I know so many of my friends across New Zealand are close to leaving because of this.
Because of this inability to accept or validate
change.
Yeah, I think empower. I think we often feel restricted instead of empowered. And I often feel as though I'm a threat. And I just want to tell people, like, I'm on your side. I'm on your side. Like, I'm for community and I'm for God, I'm not against anyone in this. If anything, this comes from a desire to know God more and know who I am in God more.
And you're just wanting to bring yourself. I love that. It's not a threat. I love that. You're bringing the gift of who you are. Yeah. And that's all you're really asking for space for.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like if I don't lead, I'm rejecting myself before other people can reject me. I don't feel like I'm my authentic self if I'm not stepping into that part of who I am.
And we're missing out. I mean, in general, we're missing out, the church not having that gift.
Yeah, definitely.
We're the poorer for it.
And I think even just hearing you say you've got friends throughout New Zealand who are on the cusp of leaving over this, and yeah, there's so much talk in church circles about, well, in Western church circles, the predominantly Pākehā church circles, about decline. Why are we not seeing young people? Why are the youth ministries smaller? All this sort of thing. And there's this pretty glaring issue that, is it just that we'd prefer not to talk about it? And yeah, those of us who are men, who are happy in our powerful positions, yeah, we kind of we can throw our hands up and go, oh, why? Well, hold on a second. Why don't we listen to people like you, Grace, or like, that are going, are voting, so to speak, with their feet. Just going, maybe there is an issue here.
I think it's scary to think about this, because then it's scary to think, what does that mean for our churches? And I think the other thing is that often when issues like this come up, we either don't do anything, we try to do everything at once. And so people go, oh my gosh, does that mean we need to fire our male pastors? And it's like, no, we need to first make space for young women, and we need to sow seeds of readiness in our churches for the generation to come. And like, yes, there may be a stepping down, there may be that, but it's the step-by-step process that we actually just need to allow women to lead.
And you just brought up the word ready, to make space, and we don't have to wait until they're actually whatever we think ready is. Could you kind of expand on that? Because I think that can be a challenge sometimes. Oh, we need to wait till people are ready. Do we?
Yeah, I think when we use the term ready, it has a lot of connotations for us of perfectionism and being polished, whereas as faith communities, we're called to be authentic, and that means messing up and getting it wrong. And so for me, even I would challenge the idea of, what does it mean to be ready? I've heard it a lot in the Baptist circles of like, we don't have women who are ready to do this thing, so we just have to wait till they're ready. And it's like, okay, one, there's intentionality in waiting, there's training, and there's all that, but two, what does it mean to be ready? Yeah, I think I would just challenge, what does it mean to be ready? And you're not going to be ready until you do it.
Exactly. You only learn it as you do it, as you walk it.
And anyone in leadership knows, if we're honest with ourselves, knows that when we started in leadership, we weren't ready. Yeah. Am I ready for the next thing? Well, probably not. Yeah. That's the reality, that there's still, I've still got stacks to learn, and I need people around me. I need the different voices around me, all this sort of stuff. And so that ready word is just kind of, it's a nice excuse, isn't it? But it's not actually, it's not real, actually.
No. And it's what you were saying, Grace, that we're not prepared for the messy. We kind of want to get straight to the thing that looks polished and looks good. And we actually don't realize that the transformation happens in the messiness. It's what you were saying about living intentionally. Transformation is happening when you guys are living together in the mess, but that's when the work happens. So we want to kind of sidestep one of the really crucial steps.
Yeah, I think it happens in the messiness, and it happens in the figuring out how to do a new thing that no one's doing, And I would just really challenge the definition of ready to, instead of being this polished final product, to be ready being willing to be wrong. I think when you're willing to be wrong, change can come and you can get past things. And I think that's a much healthier way to go about thinking about how to approach these issues.
Yeah,
I love
ready. Don't you like that, Stephen? Ready to be wrong. That's the type of ready we need to develop. Yeah,
we've talked so many times. We're back to that theme of humility again, aren't we? Like that just keeps coming up in our episodes. Yeah, that's awesome. Ready to be wrong.
It's a new definition. I think we need to get out there. Why are you not accepting the status quo? Why are you on this journey?
A few years ago, I was talking to God about some things that I felt frustrated about one of them being, this issue here. And I had this picture of a present, and inside the present, to my surprise, was 2 words, and those words were holy discontent. And I felt God say to me, follow the holy discontent. Don't get comfortable with the way things are. And I just felt like God was in this. God was in this frustration. God was in this challenging and curiosity. And so I followed that. And that's why I've ended up in so many of the places I'm in, like discipleship flats and intentional community and all this. I just really feel like in order to have change, we need to be discontent with the way things are. And we need to channel that holy discontent into creating that change and thinking of new ideas and being creative and innovative. I think I would just grow into this ball of bitterness if I didn't channel that into change, Yeah. I think that if we all bought the thing that we feel burdened for by God, and we brought it to our community, and together we fought for it and we tried to create change in that space, so much could happen. The limits are endless.
And even hearing that, it feels like a positive energy. Holy discontent.
Totally. I think there's energy and there's movement in that.
And it does allow for us being exposed to something new. It does actually feel very hopeful as I hear those words together. In fact, I love putting those 2 words together, holy and discontent, because we often don't think of it that way. We think, oh, wow, we're doing this thing and maybe it's not so good and it's because it's uncomfortable. But I can see why you have this. That's such an encouragement to keep going, And we're grateful. We're grateful for your voice to keep wanting to be in this space because, it is still a weight and it's still that you carry. And so thank you for not giving up.
Thanks, Kathy.
So, Grace, as we're kind of coming to the end of our time together today, do you have a kind of a practical suggestion or idea for our listeners? What could they do to help? What's one little step that could be taken towards the change that we've kind of been talking about and so desperately need within the church space?
Yeah, I think that change largely needs to be catalyzed by those in the church with power, those who are in leadership, actually allowing space and a platform for young women. And so what would it be like to just offer a group of young women in your church to run a church service and go, what are the things you're passionate about? What would you like to talk about? And just giving them your trust is huge. That for me as a young woman feels empowering when I'm trusted and given the freedom to do what I feel God calling me to and do what I feel God putting on my heart.
And also just acknowledging that you have something to say and it's a gift of yourself because you are for the church to build it up.
Yeah.
This conversation is really important as we acknowledge this week is International Women's Day. And I just want to thank you, Grace, for your honesty and openness and taking us on this journey and the thoughtful reflection that you've brought to us today. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome. And I appreciate, you making the space for me to be heard.
I like this idea of being able to reflect, Stephen, and for our listeners to hear some of our process.
Yeah.
So maybe you could tell us about how you felt in that moment and where you would have liked to have gone.
Yeah, so that line of I die a little bit inside, those are heavy words. Those are really heavy words. And you invite me to reflect in that moment. And I remember this, it's really clear in my mind. I remember my body just feeling the weight of the words that Grace had shared. But one thing I know about myself is when I feel something that is deep or profound or something like that, it takes me a wee while to actually find words to articulate what that feeling is and how that feels. And so in the moment, rather than sitting with the discomfort of the truth of that statement, rather than sitting with the vulnerability, you heard me go into a possible solution mode. And I remember messaging you, Kathy, and saying, I hate the way I responded in that moment.
So we didn't want to take it out because we wanted people to go on this journey with us, to see that we're learning. And I think this is a great process to be able to reflect at the end. I know in the moment, I was also feeling quite choked up.
Yeah.
And for me as a woman, because it resonates with some of my own story. And so I did throw you in it to go, what were you feeling?
Yeah.
And so I think for us to be able to acknowledge the weight of when people share their stories, and that we're learning how to hold that weight.
Yeah.
And that it's okay when we don't have the words, and that we can say that.
Exactly. And that's actually all I needed to say is that I don't have words in this moment because I feel the weight of what you've just said, Grace. And that's it. Yeah. And there probably would have been an awkward silence on the podcast, and but actually that sitting in silence with the awkwardness, with the pain, is where I have in my own story, that's where I've experienced Jesus' love the most.
Yeah.
And so I'm gutted that I missed that opportunity, but it's great to be able to reflect on the experience together.
And I am really grateful that we can do this, that we can show people how we are learning to be in this space so that they will give themselves grace.
And Grace was incredibly gracious as well when I messaged her about it afterwards. Yeah. Which was lovely.
So thank you guys for listening in and being on this journey with us.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Changes Ahead podcast.
If that resonated with you,
or you've got thoughts about the changes ahead for the church,
we'd love to hear from you.
So get in touch on Instagram or Facebook at Changes Ahead Cast,
or email us at thechangesaheadpodcast@gmail.com. See you next time.